The normal pattern when artists have to speak about other artists or architects have to speak other artists is they would start like this. Lucius Burckhardt and Cedric Price are great artists, but now let's talk about me. That's the normal pattern, and I will also follow this. In 1987, we started taking photographs of airports. In the last 26 years, we piled up a collection of hard-to-count number of images from planes and runways. The list of reasonable arguments why airports are so interesting is long as the runway itself. First of all, they deliver us on the level of visible evidence a strong image of the so-called present, the ongoing metamorphosis of the phantom that we call the now. The idea of the present is a strange bricolage about something very liquid. It's something like that I would like to describe the wrong time on a Rolex. In 1987, the present moment was clearly something different on airports than today. There were still some more leftovers of the exotic aspect of taking a plane and travel to a foreign place. Pilots and hostesses were a special species. When I was a kid in the 50s, it was common that people went on a Sunday pleasure on the terrace of an airport, watching the planes coming and going. Since then, airports made many metamorphoses. The exotic aspect was slowly disappearing, and something wonderful happened. Ugliness was added to elegance. More and more people were traveling, and airports became something like a bus station. The wonderful transformation of the extraordinary into the ordinary. The positive image of airports was suffering and lost partly his glamour. Pollution and noise, just two of the negative aspects, became part of their image. Also, the fear of terrorism changed a lot, especially in the aspect of how airports look. It was no more possible to go on an outside platform and make a deadpan image of an airport. In the beginning of our series of airport photos, the idea of deadpan was very important, to make images that photographers would call boring. Since the appearance of the airports changed, the appearance of our photos also changed. Or, as a nice contradiction, the more airports were getting boring, the more we tried to make interesting images. To make photos on airports is also a great way to kill time. While you're waiting for departure on the airport, the experience of time is a big issue. Mostly on airports you have too much time or too little. Run, 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 so we can wait. Once some smart lady said to me on the security waiting line, the abstract time and space grid can be experienced in a very figurative way. You arrive at 6 a.m. in Helsinki and your inner clock is something like 2 p.m. in Sao Paulo. Tiredness, boredom, excitement, restlessness are mixed together and create a spatial state of mind. The airport is a fantastic place for the experience of time. The value of boredom, in German called Langeweile, in which we can feel the duration of time. Deep boredom seems to be the last piece de résistance in a post-society, the spectacle. But can we say the no-fun palace has to be built? No, it would play arguments in the hands of the neoconservative. But back to the airport. You can see in the faces of the other passengers this nice expression of be falling partly out of the time and space grid. On the other side, everybody is concerned to be at a certain time at a certain place. And since we arrive or depart in the strangest day and nighttime, I often see fantastic sunrises, sunsets, or rainbows on airports. The chance to have an extraordinary nature experience on an airport is sometimes higher than being on a hike or an overnight in an alpine cabin. But also more down-to-earth observation can be made. The division of classes becomes very evident and visible on airports. Economy, business or first, with separated waiting lounges, privileges in waiting lists, and alcohol and snacks for free for people who could afford it. And you know there is even a more exclusive airport on the airport, the one for private jets and for the poor-rich NetJet. Or how countries are transformed into brands, like Italy is transformed into Alitalia, and how the Italian flag is transformed into a logo. However, for me, a lot of positive, long-gone glamour and exciting aspects of airports survived. We can say that most of things that happened in society are mirrored in airports. Stupid expressions like globalization or non-place were often used to describe airports. There is no such thing than non-places, and I highly suggest architects to stop using this brainless expression. Most of our airport photographs are not looking at these aspects. They show the view of the exterior. Sometimes the interior is only partly mirrored in the windows. This makes you think on all the things that the photographer has in his back. All these things are not visible, but because of that, as a surprise, they are very much present in our mind. Airports are very much describing also the topic of repetition and difference. Inside the repetition, the difference becomes evident. They also can be seen as heterotopian places. I was always interested in the line where a heteroutopia touches the so-called rest of the real world, the borderline of a heterotopia. The borderline of the airport heterotopia is clearly the landscape around the runways and buildings. In many of our photographs, the landscape, the weather condition, and the daytime light situation is an important part of the image. When I was asked this spring to do an artwork for the airport on the Frankfurt airport, I wanted to talk about that line, since I think art on airports is mostly highly problematic. Mostly it's just decoration done by mediocre epigones. So I had the idea to suggest a hike trail around the airport. Here is my description of the project. A hike trail around the airport. The footpath starts and ends at the main terminal. It will take you to a wonderful forest and hidden small lakes where you can experience a famous popular opera site, full of contradictions and complexity. The natural landscape and the urban technological landscape. The singing of birds, together with the vibrant sound of airplanes coming and going. Old trees, together with shiny new hangar buildings. Rare flowers and mushrooms on the ground, with silver planes up in the deep blue sky. The slow speed of walking and the breathtaking speed of modern aviation. A unique experience at Frankfurt Airport that for 5 hours takes you around the nature conservation area and the beauty experience of the contemporary urban world. The trail has to be done in a simple way and will have from time to time a wooden bench. I'm lost. For contemplation, or a platform to overlook the landscape. Signs for orientation and indication of various points of interest will be posted. Panels for identification of birds and planes are placed for the education of the hiker. A picnic and grill area and a thematic playground made out of little planes will also be built to make the hike a pleasure for kids and the so-called adults. A new platform and small wooden cabin will be built next to the runway for the passionate plane spotter. The cabin could serve as a meeting point for these plane spotters, and they could exchange their pictures and visitors could admire their rare treasures. The trail will also lead to some villages where the hungry hiker can enjoy a typical meal. On his way to the airport, the trail will hit a picturesque little lake where a bathing place will be installed. Laying in the water on his back, the hiker can watch the planes and birds in the sky. Upon seeing this, a story will cross his mind that he recently read in the newspaper. It's the story of the bird E7, who holds the world record for a non-stop flight over 11,500 kilometers from Alaska to New Zealand. And he will think about the difference between birds and planes. Airplanes and passengers are two separate things. Birds and passengers are an aircraft in one. And seeing the picturesque Also the difference of the melodic, joyful singing of birds and the powerful drone of aircrafts, making think of the popular opposite of noise and music. And how visionary Karl-Heinz von Stockhausen melted these antitheses into an artwork by composing a concert for 4 helicopters and 4 violins. And seeing the picturesque trees, plants, and ponds with the technocratic building from the airport suddenly reminded him of Seurat's wonderful painting, The Batters at Asnières, in which a lovely Sunday pleasure scene takes place in front of some factory buildings, painted in the background. Sitting on a bench, he started carefully watching small and big things around him, and suddenly the difference of important and unimportant became very unclear. He saw a snail sneaking slowly on the trail. This made him think of the popular opposite of fast and slow. He was aware that in the time he will spend on his hike around the airport, a plane will reach Cairo or Constantinople. And the snail will just reach the next tree. He was amused by his simple thoughts and draws with a stick in his hand a snail plane in the sand. With this kind of contemplations and daydreams, and after the refreshing swim, he will see the area of the airport as a part of a whole and learn the joy of contradictions. In the main lobby of Terminal 1, a notice board may be in the form of a big flag, and a hiking guide will make people curious about the trail. Also some merchandise will be also all sale, like a t-shirt, like a t-shirt, or a baseball cap with a specially designed airport hike logo. In addition to necessary information, the hiking guide will include a text in which the experience of walking in this unique landscape will be described in a literary way and illustrated with drawings and photographs. Some thoughtful words will also be included on the topic how our conditioning creates ideas of the beauty in nature by Petrarca, Lucius Burckhardt, and a piece of prose by Swiss writer Robert Walser, in which he describes walking and strolling as part of his work and a necessary thing for understanding the world. Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much for this amazing work. And actually, I had one question which was about Lucius, because obviously there are so many links to Lucius in this wonderful project for Frankfurt, thinking about Lucius's excursion when he organized hikes and also picnics on Autobahnraststätten, on service stations and so on. I was just wondering, as far as you did the lecture, we're having documents from the Lucius Burckhardt archive coming out. If you could tell us maybe a little bit about your connections to Lucius. Did you ever meet him, and did you experience his works?
Well, I had experience about like walking, going around and experience the world. This idea of strolling was coming earlier than I was knowing Lucius Burckhardt. I think it was built up with reading in the 60s Jack Kerouac's book On the Road, which really is like this kind of, he was not walking, he was in a car, but like this idea of the road movie. And later on, Robert Walser was very important with the book Ein Spaziergang, The Walk. David and I made different work referencing to this, like Red and Bear, walking in Switzerland, the right way it's called. And also our presentation at the Swiss Pavilion, where we showed, when we got the invitation for the Swiss Pavilion, we decided to not get nervous and not run to the studio and make a lot of works. We decided we take 1 year off of work and just go around and film what we see, what other people are doing. So this idea of going around and looking at small and big things, important and unimportant things, was for a long time on my radar.
And can you maybe say a few words on your Swiss Pavilion? Because actually when we started to work on our pavilion for the Architecture Biennale, your Swiss Pavilion was always on our mind, because we were sort of discussing this idea that we would actually, or could spend 6 months here in this exhibition and discover every day, new things. And I always remember that with your show, it was actually an incredible invitation to spend many, many, many hours in the pavilion.
Yeah, it had also to do with what I said first, like the experience of time that you can make on an airport, and the duration, and the duration of time that is very like connected to the wonderful experience of boredom, which and boredom, how boredom can be interrupted by being entertained, and then all these kind of things was very interesting in the pavilion. So what can I say? I mean, I should speak about every single video that was there, and that you also, in a way, realize that you can't look at all these images. It was also the impossibility of creating an image in which the whole world is in. So, pour faire un monde, il faut un monde.
There could not be a more wonderful conclusion. Peter, thank you so much. Thank you.